Good afternoon, everybody. In this video, I want to discuss a blog post that I did a couple of days ago on my website. So, this is going to be an audio version of the blog post. So, the question or the title of the blog post is Sugar really addictive? Is it a real thing? And then we go into different considerations around addiction in the blog post. And I liked the title, but the title almost misleads people into thinking the conversation is only around sugar, and it's not. I know this conversation ruffles feathers and it makes people feel uncomfortable, but I also know it's something that needs to be discussed. I have been in the health industry since 2006. I started my own health journey since 2000 or in 2006. I was 280 pounds. I lost 165 pounds. I've kept it off, but along the journey, I've had a lot of self discoveries. I've had a lot of issues and challenges around food. I've had to learn a lot, and I've worked with a lot of people, thousands of people. And in my experience, there are deeper questions that need to be asked when it comes to why are we sicker and unhealthier and more overweight than we've ever been. And right now, the research and the numbers is showing us that people are sicker and more overweight than they've ever been, which is mind blowing when you consider we've got all these different practices. We've got paleo, we've got keto, we've got now Ozempic, we've got exercise. Like we've got everything, but nothing's working. Nothing is working. Why? So, one question that really bothers me a lot, and that is a strong word to say bother. It bothers me a lot. And I think part of it is because of my profession and my personality. I'm highly driven, and if I set a goal, I will hit the goal. So, there's the personality aspect of that. But the question of why do people stop showing up for themselves? Like it really plays on my mind a lot. And anytime I do my guest interviews, doctors, other health professionals, I try to delve into this when I can. Why? And I've spoken to psychotherapists. I had Abigail Leave on the podcast, and she was amazing. Really trying to why do you think women, especially, stop showing up for themselves? And all I can really establish so far, I haven't received the best answers from people I've asked, and from my own perception and watching what my clients do, and my friends even do, and my students, even my family. I keep coming back to, and even myself, because I watch my own habits, but all it keeps coming back to is stress and unhappiness, and people are very, very unhappy. Society is putting a lot of pressure on people now and has been for a decade or so, and we were so manipulated, and there was so much fear mongering throughout the pandemic, and it really hurt people. I don't want to say it affected people because it did more than affect people. It hurt people a lot, caused a lot of anxiety, caused a lot of hormonal imbalances, caused a lot of adrenal dysfunction. Just people are suffering. So that's what I see right now. I speak to a lot of people, I have a lot of clients. And even looking at myself, I can honestly say whenever I go off plan or I go off track with my nutrition or even my exercise, or I just say, I'm going to do nothing today, I'm just going to watch Netflix all day and have some treats, it's usually because, for me personally, I'm either very stressed over something or I'm tired. Like I'm very tired if I've overtrained or overworked or something. But when I look at other people, there is an aspect, I'll be honest, there's an aspect of unhappiness in my life that can cause me to be stressed or get fed up and then maybe go off plan. But I think my unhappiness is minimal to other people's unhappiness. My unhappiness is more, uh, am I living my optimal life? Am I doing what makes me happy? Am I expressing myself in a creative way? But other people's unhappiness is different. And I have trauma, not to disregard the effects of trauma. I think everybody does. I have trauma since I was a baby, since I was a newborn. When I was a 1 year old, I was scalded and got third-degree burns, and I ended up in hospital for 6 months. They didn't think I was going to make it. I had skin grafting and all done, and I still have scars from that. I don't remember that, but it obviously left its mark on my central nervous system. And everyone has trauma, and how we deal with it is different. But it's important to understand that with this trauma, childhood stress, not being loved, not feeling like you're being taken care of properly, not feeling that you're good enough, all of that comes full circle back to one big hormone being affected. And that is dopamine, which is our happiness and reward and feeling like we're achieving stuff in life and we're being our best selves and we're being loved and all that. Like it all seems to come back to dopamine. And the research shows us that. So let's jump into this blog post that I did. And you can read this, but I wanted to do an audio version just to kind of give a couple of my own thoughts on it. I think this is very, very important. Again, I've been doing this for years, like long time, almost 2 decades. And although I can give people the best nutrition advice and structure and tell them exactly what to do, there's a bigger problem at hand here, and I really believe it is unhappiness. And that gets compounded with stress and societal expectations. Anyway, so the blog post you'll find on my website, shemainsmodelhealth.com. And it's basically titled, Is Sugar Really Addictive? And I know different people are going to have different considerations around this. It's not just sugar, it's all addictions that we're looking at here. So in the blog post, I first mentioned a famous study called the Rat Park experiment. And the links are all on the blog post. And this experiment was done in Canada by a researcher called Dr. Bruce Alexander. And he conducted this experiment because he didn't believe that addicts were sick people or that they were genetically flawed, and that if you were to give them a little bit of morphine or heroin, that they immediately become addicts for life. He believed there was something more going on. So he created this study where he took these rats and he separated them into two groups. And then both groups, he got addicted to morphine. One group were kept in their normal rat cages and they were abused, and the cage wasn't cleaned very often, and it was these horrific circumstances. But the other group, they were treated very well, and they were basically put into an amusement park for rats. It had all the food they wanted, it had bright colors, they had running wheels everywhere, it was cleaned regularly, they had nice scents, they had music, they had everything. And they also were not being harassed by the lab assistants who were maybe euthanizing them or poking them with needles. But both rat groups at the same time had a free source of morphine in their water. So the rats that were left in the cage, our generic cage where they were miserable, they were mistreated, the cage was filthy, they learned to press the lever to release more morphine into their water because they kept wanting it, because they were so unhappy, they were miserable, they were in such a stressful, horrible environment that they kept pressing this lever so that they could escape this environment and they could get their hit of morphine. But the other group of rats who were having a great life and spoiled rotten and they just had everything they want and they were living their best lives, as we say, they basically voluntarily detoxed themselves from addiction. They just, they didn't want it. It slipped their mind. They were so happy with their environment and all the other distractions and fulfilling their best life and having fun that they didn't even think to go to the morphine. Even though they experienced pretty painful symptoms, including seizures in the first week, they still didn't go back to the morphine. because they were living their best lives. They weren't miserable and being abused like the other group were. So that's very important to note. So then, what Dr. Alexander noticed is that um, even though the addiction was seemed to be a way out, that the addiction in itself was a desperate attempt by the rodents to self medicate. So they were perceiving that something in their environment was terrible and that they had the ability to temporarily relieve their symptoms or whatever it was that was bothering them. So when we look at humans, if we are temporarily relieving our stress with sugar, even though you know that in the long run it's taking you off plan and it's going to make you feel worse, you're going to go ahead and do it because you're relieving this pain, this discomfort that you're feeling. And if you're a really sick person and something is really bothering you, like you have a lot of stuff going on, you're not going to be worried about being off plan or the repercussions in the future. You're just going to be focused on here and now, and you're going to want to alleviate the pain as soon as possible and self medicate. And I can understand that. I think most people can understand. Yes, like this is why it's happening. Um, so whether or not that's self-medicating with sugar or alcohol or sex or exercise or gambling, there is when we dig deeper into it, there's the unhappiness, there's the stress, there's the low dopamine. And unless the environment changes, that's not going to change. So addiction is usually an attempt to medicate that condition, that pain, that unhappiness, the depression, chronic pain, which can exacerbate the stress response. But all of this is essentially low dopamine. When you look at the amount of society that is self medicating somehow, be it through alcohol or gambling or sugar or whatever it is, it really screams that a lot of society is very unhappy. Most of society is stressed, but we are very joyless. We're unhappy. We're frustrated. We're disheartened. We're discouraged. Most people have low dopamine. Now, there's obviously going to be different levels of low dopamine because we're individual and we each have different levels of resiliencies and strength. But most of us have dopamine issues. And again, dopamine is that happiness, feeling rewarded, feeling of achievement, accomplishment. I'm progressing in life. And progression is one of the keys to happiness, as well stated by both Arthur Brooks and Tom Bilyeu. So there's a lot of unhappiness now. And if I was to put the question forward, like, why are people so unsuccessful with their health and weight loss goals? Is it because they're so unhappy? Maybe that's the answer. The research definitely indicates that. And obviously, I'm focused more on health and weight loss and sugar and food addictions than I am the other addictions. But regardless, a lot of unhappiness going on here. So back to the article. Um, so the whole theory about addiction being tied to dopamine, it would seem it's correct, but it's that people who have the tendency for addiction are usually people under a tremendous amount of stress. And these people run on cortisol and adrenaline. I speak about adrenaline dominance a lot thanks to my mentor, Dr. Michael Platt. So cortisol and adrenaline is very high and dopamine is low. And these again can be in levels. Some people's cortisol and adrenaline is higher, some people's lower. Those who have a higher tendency to addiction tend to have higher levels of cortisol and adrenaline and so forth. And these people, especially those with the higher levels of cortisol and adrenaline and very low dopamine, these people crave hedonistic activities. Like they're not just giving in to chips and cookies for one evening because they've had a long day and then they're straight back on track for the next 6 weeks. And it happens once in a blue moon. These people are hedonistic activities, whether that is drugs or exciting experience. We've heard of adrenaline junkies, activities, skydiving, bungee jumping, or anything that someone would start to do on a pathological level. Now, medicine would refer to them as junkies, but um, maybe we need to rename that as very unhappy, joyless people, and they're looking for that hit of dopamine. So, if you don't change the environment of the addict, they will immediately slip back. Like the likelihood of success in health and weight loss, if you don't change your environment and address what's stressing you and making you unhappy and causing you to feel this discomfort, the chances of success are very slim. And I know people don't like to hear this, but it's true. The numbers are astounding. Only 5% of people who lose weight will keep it off in the long term being 5 years or more. Um, like, that's astounding. Considering the amount of money people pay for help to get healthy and hit their body goals and their goal weight and all that. So, nearly everybody relapses. So, if you don't change the environment, you will see people, something will happen. Something will happen in their day or their week that will cause them to immediately slip back, and they will struggle to get back on track, if never getting back on track. And it's not a coincidence that 97% of, well, I think it's 85% of alcoholics, they relapse after 6 months out of being out of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Again, because they're going back into their environment. They're not changing anything. And it's been demonstrated in as early as the 1960s that administering a chemical, which is now illegal, but there is research being done on it, LSD, there is potential now for it to be used on addicts again because the numbers of addiction are just out of control. But back in the 1960s, it was known that when you used LSD to treat addiction, it was a very potent anti-serotonin and pro-dopamine effect, and it pretty much cured every addiction. It was also given to people in prison and violent criminals and repeat offenders. All these people, when they got out of prison, they stopped being criminals when they had been treated with LSD, and they were able to go back to their normal life and rejoin society. Um, but everybody else who did not get treated with LSD, they relapsed and they committed to a life of crime and ended up back in prison. Because prison was almost easier as well. Because in prison, you know where your meals are coming from, you know where you're going to be sleeping that night. So it does take away an element of pain. But the word addiction is really a wrong word. It's people or organisms who believe consciously or subconsciously that sugar, for example, relieves some kind of discomfort or issue. And it does. It does, because sugar will boost dopamine, and sugar will help suppress cortisol. Sugar is the best tool for suppressing cortisol. So it does work. But again, people who crave sugar tend to have high levels of cortisol and relatively low levels of dopamine, and they go hand in hand, and there's no escaping it. Not even going down the rabbit hole of all the other hormones, but these specifically. Um, and these also go hand in hand with this so-called addictive personality type. People who have addictive personalities, they can easily become addicted to another thing when they get off one thing. So it's not necessarily the specific drug of choice, it is just the addictive behavior. And they usually have an already established endocrinological disorder, so hormone disorder, that could have been derived from in the womb, early childhood trauma. I've heard of people have their mom, when they were pregnant on them, they had issues, they had anger management issues. The mom had trauma, and then that bled into the child, and now the child, although had a somewhat nice life, they have these markings of trauma. So it can stem back for decades. It can even be generational, which is mind blowing that what happened to our grandparents can impact us directly. But it's a very important conversation, as you're seeing. In childhood, we're a lot more resilient in childhood because we have new hormones. We don't have the wear and tear, the oxidation that we have as we get older and heading more towards our later years. So we are more resilient. So a lot of the time, as children, and we'll say it about our own children or other people's children, kids are resilient. They're stronger than we give them credit for. And they are at that time, but that doesn't mean that the stress at that time is not marking them or tagging them somehow, and that they will almost pay the piper or pay the price for that down the line in the future. It's an important consideration. Kids are resilient. They are tough, but it leaves its mark. It does. Whatever the trauma or issue is, it will leave its mark. And we would be naive to think that it doesn't when just looking at us adults now. If I had never had any other stress in my life, that one instance of being scalded when I was a baby, it still affected my central nervous system. I still will get the jitters every now and then. I have to have a lot of electrolytes to support my central nervous system. So these events, they do affect kids. Not so much in the immediate, but they will pay the price down the line. So when you're young, stress, sugar, and even other substances, even when you're a teenager, alcohol, even drugs, can give you this sense of euphoria because you don't have conditions stacked against you just yet. But as you get older, your anti cortisol hormones drop with age, your adrenals start to atrophy and become less resilient, and the gonads or the sex organs are not functioning well. And then all you're left with are the negative effects of cortisol and adrenaline, which nearly all of us have. Um, so we really do, as society, as a community, need to consider like, why are we all so stressed? Why are we running on adrenaline? Why are we all so unhappy? Um, so it does, it disturbs me, especially when it affects how my people show up for themselves. So, continuing on with the blog post, it was known that anti cortisol and anti serotonin drugs, and I know that can be confusing because people are told serotonin is good for you. And that's in context, and I'm hoping to have someone on the podcast soon to talk to us about serotonin and really help you again understand this misnomer we've been told. But it's been known that drugs that are anti cortisol or anti serotonin, they treat bipolar, which is a cortisol driven type of mania, like stress. Like, think of Britney Spears, all the pressure and stress she had on her, and now all of a sudden she's bipolar. It's also been known that since the 1960s, that anti serotonin drugs treat addiction. Anti serotonin drugs treat addiction. We know this. The pharmaceutical, the medical industry, they know this. Anything that blocks serotonin decreases cortisol and increases dopamine. Dopamine is our important hormone, not so much serotonin. Now, serotonin can be beneficial, but it's in context and it's dosage dependent. So basically, by blocking the stress response and allowing the organism to get back to normalcy or back to their health, once you get back to health, a lot of these times, most of these cravings, if not all of these cravings, disappear. And I hear this a lot. Like when I look at my successful clients that have maintained their goal weight for years and years and years, and they are in that 5%. Not only did they change the environment, but they also addressed their triggers and their stress and what was making them unhappy. And they've not only, obviously, they made like nutrition and health changes with me, but they made other lifestyle changes outside of what I do with them because they're really chasing their happiness and being their best. Um, and it's more than the research shows us that more than 80% of people with addictions, they can resolve the issue by themselves given the tools and changing the environment. And the other 20% um, who don't resolve the addictions, they are people whose environment didn't change. They stayed in the terrible relationship. They didn't remove all the junk food from their house. They stayed in a job that they hate and made them miserable, whatever the scenario. Um, they didn't change that. They didn't do what they needed to do to fix the problem overall. But when we come back to sugar, sugar does lower the stress response. Sugar suppresses cortisol, it calms us down, it improves metabolism. And when it's framed like that, maybe sugar isn't so bad. And the research is definitely starting to do 360. I know not everyone watches the research like I do, but things are changing and they're changing pretty fast. And it's all pointing back to stress. Low carb increases stress, low carb suppresses thyroid and metabolism. It's not as simple as people think. There's a lot to be considered, but the main consideration, I think, for everyone should be stress. So the problem is not sugar, I don't think, but more so the underlying problem of low dopamine and not feeling good. And why are we blaming sugar? I know there's different, I'm addicted to sugar, insulin, blah, 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 immunity. I know there's a lot of different avenues that we can go down when we discuss sugar, but the cravings, and why do we give in to these cravings? Because they make us feel good. They help us relax for a time when things are not going how we'd like them to. They give us the dopamine hit. The same as why people use cocaine. It's not necessarily because it makes them feel good in the beginning in any way. It's because it gives them energy. And cocaine, at least in the early stages, has a pro-dopamine effect. So it gives you this boost of energy. It gives you the metabolism. And then it gives you the dopamine hit. So you're addressing the stress, and then you're addressing the metabolic dysfunction. Why is the metabolism not working properly? But again, it all comes back to stress, because if you don't address stress, you're going to struggle to get your metabolism working properly. And I can guarantee that. I see it all the time with my clients. You got to look at the stress, you got to fix sleep. Then we do everything else. Then we get the mitochondria and the metabolism working. Then we start looking at the hormones. But if you don't look at like what's causing me this discomfort in the first place, you're going to end up chasing your tail. And that is a literal metaphor I'm using. So consider this. There's nothing really addictive about feeling good. Everybody wants to feel good. If we didn't want to feel good, we wouldn't do what we do. And if you define life like that it's bad to feel good, then we're almost saying that your entire life has been filled with disease or illness because it's not okay to feel good. Everybody wants to feel good. And as the saying goes, everything good in life is illegal, immoral, or fattening. And that expression tells us the attitude that a lot of people have towards life, and that we need to change some things. We've managed to define some things that are pillars of life, like rest and sugar, as bad. Now, everything is in context. I'm not saying go eat a load of sugar or junk food. Everything is in context. But this is a conversation and consideration. If you're craving something, and I said this to my group this morning, you really need to evaluate why you're craving it. What's causing you to crave this food? How are you feeling? And usually you'll find the answer is stress, or tiredness and lack of sleep will cause stress, or unhappiness. Something's upsetting you. Why? You're struggling to find joy. Like, what's going on? You really need to sit with yourself and evaluate how the cravings are making you feel, and even take note of them. That's a task I have my group doing this week. And when we look at it and at the research, we see that, again, not to beat a dead horse to death, we see that all addictions have two things in common. Two things. There's chronic stress or trauma, and then the organism or the person is desperately trying to mitigate whatever that stress or trauma is by boosting dopamine. So we have a stress or a trauma, and now we're trying to self-medicate. Whatever the medication of choice is, alcohol, sugar, bungee jumping, whatever, over exercise, but there's something driving that. So it's important we take note of this. Sugar is one way, cocaine is another, promiscuity, gambling, all of these things give you a dopamine rush. Exercise gives you a dopamine rush, but there's obviously somewhat healthy addictions because too much exercise can be unhealthy. But medicine tries to define these as pathological, that it's a mental health issue per se, that there's a problem in the brain. But the only reason most people continue to do these things is because their baseline dopamine is low. They're so unhappy. Like desperate people will go to desperate measures. And we each have our different levels of how unhappy or desperate we are. So it's my recommendation that you reflect, you work on your cortisol and stress, and you do more. This is easier said than done. God, do I know it is. But you do more of what makes you feel happy and fulfilled, even if it's only for 5 minutes a day. Start somewhere. Um, and then the next time you have cravings, you stop and reflect on what's driving them. How do you feel? What's happening today? What happened yesterday? What are some other things you could do to reduce your cortisol and increase your dopamine? Could you go for a walk? Could you do some exercise? Could you watch a funny movie? Could you hug a loved one? Could you be intimate with your partner? Orgasms have been shown to increase dopamine. So I'm talking about having a healthy sex life, not a sex addiction. Um, and there's one thing I'm going to elaborate on. And again, these links for everything I've cited is they're in the blog post on ShamainsModelHealth.com. If you click education, then it'll bring you to my different educational articles. Um, People don't like to hear this, but I'm going to say it. And I know people don't like to hear this. And it's not my position to make people feel guilty over their food choices. It's my position to make people be educated. And then based on that education, you know what? You're free to make your own choice, but at least you know. Um, so, foods that combine fat and sugars together. So, let's think of frappuccinos, donuts, cookies, chips. They've got a lot of fat and they've got a lot of sugar. They have been shown to be more addictive than sugar alone. Think, like I said, what is your addiction? A lot of people is chips, I've noticed, or cookies. Part of this is because these foods are high in a different ingredient called a polyunsaturated fatty acid, and I'll have a podcast episode coming on this because this is so important. These are the PUFAs, and these are known to put it in layman's terms, these are like bad fats. And these activate opioid receptors in your brain, very similar to how morphine and heroin work. And if you've been following my work for a while, you know that PUFAs also slow down metabolism and thyroid. They increase adrenal dysfunction, they increase estrogen, they increase gut issues, systemic inflammation, and they increase feelings of sadness and depression. These polyunsaturated fatty acids have, it's really, in my experience in nutrition, which is a lot, I've really now shifted my focus towards reducing these. They are poison in the body. And this I know is going to be easier said than done. But if I was to sit you down and give you pure table sugar, or let's say pure orange juice or very ripe fruit, so these pure forms of sugar, how much of that are you going to eat? Is that your addiction? You wouldn't eat much. How many tablespoons of table sugar, would you eat? One, you probably wouldn't even be enticed to have one. That's pure sugar. But if I put chips or cookies in front of you, how many of them would you eat? They're not pure sugar. They are not pure sugar, and that's something people need to consider. They are a combination of fat and carbohydrates, or fat and sugar, but mostly these bad fats. Now, that's not to say we can't have an issue with good fats. It gets quite complicated. We can, but that's important. Like, maybe we should rephrase it. I don't have a sugar addiction. I have a sugar and fat food combination addiction. So, clearly, an important conversation to be had. And a lot of considerations around different tendencies, like bad sleep can increase your cravings for junk food or whatever. But I think it all comes back to the unhappiness. And I will say this, I will be bold enough to say this, I blame society for what it has done to a lot of people. The pressures that we're put under, the expectations, especially on women. Feminism is not that great, let me say. It's not all it's cracked up to be, especially when it's destroying your health and making you miserable. Maybe you would be better off staying at home and expressing yourself creatively and working on your marriage and raising your children and taking care of the home and growing your own food. Maybe you don't need to be in the office 9 to 5, but society has designed it like this, that two people do need to work to keep a roof over the head, to pay a mortgage, to put food in the fridge. And then we end up having husbands and wives neck and neck arguing over financial issues, and they're tired and they can't stand each other, and marriages are falling apart, and we're snapping at our kids and we're unhappy. And I do blame a lot of society. I think we have been manipulated in ways that I could go down a huge rabbit hole on, but it obviously gets me riled up because I see it affecting my loved ones. I see it affecting my family, my friends, my students. But I'm glad we're having this conversation. I know it's going to ruffle a few feathers, but it's part of what I do. So let me know, was this helpful? Was this insightful? Do you have any feedback? What do you think? Okay, thank you. Bye.